Welcome to another episode of It Had to Be Said podcast, where we say out loud what you think in private. No topic is off limits. And in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the Julio Foolio case, and we're primarily going to be talking about Julio Foolio, the one of the key defendants in that, which is Sean Getright, as well as the whole situation and my personal thoughts on everything that's happening, including all this gang violence that's happening up there, primarily in the Jacksonville area. Now, to begin, I want to start off by saying what happened to Julio Foolio is a complete tragedy. Anytime a human being is killed or is murdered or dies is a sad moment, right? There are some people that I always say, look, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I had a brother of mine that was murdered, and he lived a certain lifestyle. And so when I got the phone call that he was murdered, I wasn't really surprised. I wasn't angry at his killers. I mean, that's the lifestyle that he decided to live. And so therefore, when certain things happen, you just have to accept it. So I'm talking from my own personal experience when I'm doing this particular podcast. Now, with that being said, where do we begin? All right. So let's first talk about like the whole situation of, the idea of these street gangs, in today's society. What are these street gangs? What do they do to make money? They do credit card frauds. They hold up stores, retail theft. A lot of the stuff that they do, it's not, like drug related or how it used to be back in the days where a gang would own a certain section of a city or blocks, and that's where they did their business as far as selling drugs, because drugs back then, like in the 90s and the 80s, was their primary source of income. Nowadays, things are more like white-collar type crime. There's some violent crimes that happen as far as like sticking up stores and everything like that, but a lot of it is credit card frauds, and financial crimes. So really, drugs don't really play that big of a deal in today's street gang activity, because there's not as much demand or that much demand for it. And the biggest drug right now that a lot of people are buying really is marijuana, which is practically legal in most states. So there's not really a black market for it. So then you ask yourself, well, why are these street gangs, why are they going after each other? Why are they killing each other, right? And a lot of that just has to do with ego. A lot of that just has to do with, well, you said something bad about me, so I'm going to start beefing with you. And the more we exchange words, and then it becomes something where we have to get physical and we have to get guns involved and we get violent. Somebody has to die. And then the rivalry begins because you did something to so-and-so. So therefore I hate you and I hate your gang, and we're going to continue going after each other. It's like the redneck version of a family feud, these families, they hate each other for generations, and nobody really knows where it started and why it started. They just know, like, we're just supposed to hate the other family, down the street. And it's the same thing with a lot of these gang violence. They're just supposed to hate each other because they're just from different gangs or because something happened so long ago. So this is one of the reasons why I did a podcast when I first started this. I think it was podcast number 3 or 4, where I said we need to bring back organized crime, because we need to bring back the OGs to explain to these young guys, look, if you're making money, the more flashy you are, the more attention you're going to bring to yourself. The more violent you are, the less chance you're going to have to really enjoy your money. Because if you think about it, if you're a criminal or you're doing certain things to make money, you're doing that because you want to make money and you want to be able to enjoy it. But if you're too flashy, there's too much violence happening around you, you're going to end up dead or you're going to end up in jail. So I don't understand I understand why, but I wish these young men would understand the concept of you make money to enjoy it. You don't make money so you can end up in jail. You don't make money so you can end up dead and not be able to enjoy it. So if you're going to make money and you want to enjoy it, don't be as violent, don't look for trouble, and don't be so flashy to where you're going to end up in jail. So with that being said, now let's look at the whole situation with Julio Foolio, right? Julio Foolio, let's say before he became a rapper, let's say he had no education. Let's say his family upbringing was not the best. Let's say he had a really tough situation, and the only thing he felt he can do was, get involved in gang activity. All right. And once he got involved in gang activity, then he decided, he's going to get into the rap music. One of the first things that any young man involved in the music industry should think about is, why are you doing rap music? Most rappers are getting involved with it for a couple things: money, clothes, cars, and fame as well. Right. So you want those things. So if you're a rapper and then you become famous, you start making some money and you have the women, you could buy the nice clothes, you can drive the nice cars and have the big house, isn't that the whole reason why you tried to become a rapper, or, you wanted to become famous? So now that you have these things, why are you doing something that's going to more than likely cause you to lose your life, or even go to jail, or lose everything that you have worked so hard to gain financially? And I just, it just baffles me, and it gets underneath my skin when I see stuff like this happening, because this young man, I don't listen to his particular type of music, but, there was a lot of people that were listening to his music, and he was making money. And the only thing he had to do was just basically say, well, I'm making my money. I can take care of my family. I've got just about everything that I need. What's wrong with just walking away? What's wrong with just, picking up my family, moving out of the state? And since I know I have a horrible history here, I will never perform in the state of Florida again. And I would perform everywhere else. So this way I don't, get involved with those individuals anymore. I mean, that's something that most rappers or any rapper can do, So now that I'm thinking about it, I'm actually going to do a podcast on, how to save yourself from, or how to eject yourself from certain environments once you make it. I'll make a separate podcast on that one, right? But it's just like, there was no real reason once you make it as a rap. Once Julio Foolio's made it as a rapper and he made it and he was famous, there was really no real reason for him to still be there, still be involved in certain activities. And some people may have called him a sellout. Some people may have said, you abandoned us, whatever the case may be. But the ones that wanted to come along and wanted to provide a service and be involved in that and help grow him as an individual and make a business out of it, they could have come along. Not everybody had to be abandoned, but you don't want to bring people around or have people around that are still about gang activity, because they're not thinking about you, and they're not thinking about how it could affect you and what you've actually built. There's nobody. I won't say there's nobody. I personally, and I think a lot of people, if they take the time to think about it, they'll say, what's the use in having money, having a nice house, having nice cars, and not being able to go out and enjoy yourself because you're worried that somebody's, trying to shoot you and kill you. You're constantly looking over your shoulders. It's just doesn't make any sense. That's just my perspective on that. Now, let's talk about this whole case, right? And like I said, let's talk about primarily one of the defendants, which is Sean Gethright, I think his name is. I can't ever pronounce it correctly. Now, there was a couple guys who were involved in the shooting, but this particular young man, the reason why I'm talking about him in particular is because some people are built for that life, like as far as the life of, being a gangster, a killer. Some people have a reasoning for it. They may not have a family. They may not be able to go to school. That might just be how they grew up in the environment. But this young man, he's not like the other defendants. When they were found guilty of murder, the murder of Julio Foolio, the state was going after the death penalty. And when the state went after the death penalty, this young man, he cried. He cried. He did not want to die. He has a criminal history. He was involved in a previous shooting before. And that also, I think, has, and this is the part where I blame the state, the judge, and I also blame the parents as well for this young man being in the situation he's in. When he did that first shooting, and they gave him the $50,000 bond, I don't think he should have gotten the bond. You shot up an apartment building, or you shot up a building, right? And the intent was there to kill somebody, to harm someone. You should have not gotten any bond. You should have been stuck in prison because they had you dead to rights. You should have been stuck in prison. Even though you were 17, you should have been stuck in prison, tried as an adult, and prosecuted, right? You were given bond, and there was not a sense of urgency for the case to move forward, right? And the fact that, the parents or the mother who was involved was just like, went out and was able to get that bond. It was only a $50,000 bond. Now, with a $50,000 bond, you only got to put up, what, $5,000, and and then the mother did that. She put up the bond, or whoever put up the bond, they got him out of jail. And when he was out of jail, and he still decided to move the way he moved. It's just kind of like, as a parent, you have to be able to sit there and say, I have to show my son, I have to show my child tough love, because you have to sit there and say, well, if I didn't raise you to be walking around with guns and shooting up places and trying to kill people, and you did this, and maybe me as a parent, I never knew this about you. Maybe me as a parent, I never suspected that you were this type of person. But the moment I realized that, I need to take a step back and say, I think you'll be safer off in prison. Because if I leave you out on the streets right now, if I get you out of prison and I put you back out into society, you are going to go right back into that. And you're probably going to kill somebody, you're going to hurt somebody, or you're going to get yourself killed. So me as a loving parent, I'm going to leave you where you're at, because I think that's the safest place for you to be, away from the influences. And maybe by you learning from the mistakes, or maybe by you sitting there in prison and realizing that, and taking the time to reflect on the situation and suffering real consequences, maybe then you may, you may take a step back. But if I just bailed you out after you did something where you shot up an apartment building and somebody could have died, imagine what you're going to do when you get back out, especially if you suffer no consequences. And I accept you back in, and I blame everybody else around you. And I say, yeah, it's not your fault. You didn't do it. We're gonna allow you to commit attempted murder. We're gonna bail you out of jail, and we're gonna support you to keep you out of jail. It's not something good. And that's the part where I blame the parent, right? Now, where I blame the state is the state should have never given bail. The state should have put an urgency on this case. The judge should have never given bail. I'm sorry, because the judge is the one who gives the bail. The judge is the one who gave the bail. The state is the one who's going to say how fast they want to pursue this case and how fast they want to move forward with it and push it forward. And they just sat on it, to the point where this guy was able to get bailed out, go out, and then he committed this murder. And now the state is saying, oh, we want to go for the death penalty. All right. So, so I think the system broke down and failed us law-abiding citizens in so many different ways. It failed us in a lot of different ways. And it continues to fail us because, there are so many cases where somebody's a repeat offender. And every time they get locked up and they get bailed out or they get let out, the level of crime that they committed just continues to escalate and escalate and escalate. And I also blame a lot of black leaders in the black community because they want to go ahead and they want to say, no, we're being targeted. You got to give them more opportunities, more chances, This young man, Sean Gethright, he was an ambassador for South Africa with his school. He was doing photography. He was doing a lot of different things, right? Positive things so he understood that there was opportunities outside gang activity. He understood that there was opportunities to grow, apparently. So his family was somewhat involved in his life, right? But yet, this young man still decided to do what he did. Now, when he got when he was found guilty and they said we're going after the death penalty, that's the reason why he cried. He cried while his co-defendants, the other guys who were charged with, the other guy that was charged with murder and was going to receive the death penalty, was laughing. And I guarantee if you look at that other young man's life, he really probably didn't have anything to live for. He didn't have anything to live for. He didn't have anything positive going on in his life. More than likely, he couldn't see past a certain point. This is why this young man, even though they were like, okay, death penalty, he's sitting there laughing like, okay, well, that's better than being here, because as far as he's concerned, being here on this planet is like being in hell. So there's probably something better once he's gone, you know. But Sean, he understood. He saw what could be on the other side. He experienced it. So he knew what he was losing out on. And this is why that young man cried, you know. So I think that's a very important lesson to a lot of parents, which is if you have a child and you see your child doing certain things, right, you have to be able to sit there and use this as an experience to say, you know, hey, like, look at this case of these young men. They committed a crime. They're not playing with you guys anymore. They're putting you guys in jails. They're locking you up. And if your child does something and you know your child is on that wrong path and something happens to them, let them suffer the consequences. And I'll tell you like this, to any parent that is listening, it starts with the school system. And the reason why I say it starts in the school system is because your child is going to look at how you react when a teacher calls or when they say, oh, my teacher doesn't like me, and you have to have a parent-teacher meeting. All right. Remember, that teacher is the one who's supposed to teach your child and educate your child and start helping to prepare your child for the real world. And when that child comes home and say, well, my teacher doesn't like me, that's why they suspended me, or my teacher doesn't like me, that's why they gave me an F, or they failed me on this test, or they gave me suspension, and you as the parent just automatically believe that child, and you go out there and you defend the shit out of that child, and you cuss out the teacher, or you fight with the teacher or argue with the teacher in front of that child, you're just reinforcing to that child that they can get away with whatever they want. And that's kind of where it begins. So you have to be really careful about that. You know, I remember one time where my mom told me, don't hang out with my brothers, because my brothers were, you know, they weren't the best of guys. Like, you know, they had some, you know, they're involved in things that they had no business being involved in. And, you know, and I told my mom, I said, no, Mom, you know, okay, cool, whatever the case may be. And one weekend I decided to go down to Broward. And I went to spend the weekend with some friends who came to visit. And you know, my brothers were there. My brothers, they came, they picked us up, and we went out to party. And keep in mind, I'm like 15 and 16 at the time. So, you know, my brothers, they're like in their 20s. And they're like, yeah, I want to take you to party and whatever the case may be. And they didn't realize that they were indoctrinating me into a certain type of environment. They just figured, you know, this is my little brother. I'm just going to take you out. We're going to have a good time, whatever the case may be. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm excited to be hanging out with my older brother. You know, I'm excited because I'm like, you know, I don't really hang out with them like that. And, you know, and we get pulled over. And some things happen. You know, they were arrested. Now, I'm underage, so the police officers go, well, look, we're going to give you an opportunity to, you know, call somebody to come pick you guys up. If nobody comes and pick you guys up, it was me and another friend of mine. They were like, well, we're going to have to take you guys in. So I remember calling my mom, and my mom said, what was her words? Her words were, I told you not to hang out with them. I did not send you down there. You know, deal with it. I looked and I was just like, what the hell? You know, I was like, what the hell? And then, so my friend who was with me, he called his older sister, and they came and they picked us up. So we ended up not going to jail with my brother. And I remember the next day, my brother calls my mom, and he calls her collect from the prison. And my mom goes, don't accept no collect calls, you know. And I ended up making it home later the next day. And my sister then looked at me. My mom just looked at me and was like, "Oh, so you end up not going to jail?" And I'm just looking like, "So you really weren't going to come pick me up?" She's like, "I did not send you down there to go hang out with him." And she already had warned me about it. And my sister at the time, she looks at me and she's just like, "Yep, mom told me not to accept that collect call. So you're lucky you made it home." From that day on, I never hung out with my brothers. I never hung out with him from that day on. Anyone that was a troublemaker, I never hung out with them. And until this day, I'm a soul. I hang out to myself. If you bring any kind of drama around me, I don't deal with it. I don't want to get involved because I realize something. If I get in trouble and it's something that could have been avoided, my mom, my family, which is the only person I really had down here, she was just going to leave me hanging. She was just going to leave me out to dry. So that scared the living daylights out of me. I think at the time I was like 16 or 17. And yeah, like I was 16, I believe, at the time. And I was like, yo, this is not happening again. I'm never getting in trouble because mom is just going to leave me hang to dry. And keep in mind, my mom absolutely loves me. She provides everything for us, She takes care of us. She was like, I would say the best mom in the entire world. And yet it snapped into place really quick because I'm like, she loves me, but at the same time, she's willing to discipline, and that right there was a lesson like that I had to learn with my kids, which is I can love you. I can love you to death. I would be willing to die for you. And in some cases, I have to let you suffer in order to discipline you, in order for you to learn, And I think that there's a lot of parents that don't do that with their kids. So this young man, I feel like, not only did the system not protect us as citizens and could have prevented the loss of Julio Foolio, but I also think if the system and his parents were in place and the system had prosecuted him for the first crime and the parents had, or the family had allowed him to go through the systems and go through the ringer because nobody was killed in that first shooting and nobody was dead, it's kind of like he wouldn't have served as much time. He would have probably learned his lesson and could have changed his life, and he wouldn't be in the situation he is now. This is why I say we have to sometimes let our kids suffer. We have to let them suffer the consequences of their actions. All right. And I think also one of the most important things for me, and I know this podcast is going on a little bit long, is because I feel like this is so important. I think one of the other things that are really important is the fact that we also tell our kids, you don't mess with people who have nothing to live for. The other guys involved who was being charged for murder was found guilty and was being sentenced to the death penalty, sat there and he laughed. He was laughing. Why was he laughing? Why was he not afraid? Why was he not crying? He showed no remorse. Even while on the run, he was taunting people, And this guy, Sean, over here, he's crying his eyes out because he decided to get involved with somebody who has nothing to live for. So more than likely, they probably helped egg them on. And they probably helped and reinforce the fact that, oh, this is not a big deal. Let's just go out and do this. This is why, I say as parents, we can use this as an experience to say, look at this young man. He made some mistakes. But look at his family. Look at the things that he was doing in school. Look at him traveling to Africa with his family. So he knew that there was something valuable in being a good, productive member of society. But he got involved with certain individuals and he let them egg him on into thinking, hey, this is how it is. Like this is the cool thing to do. And now that they're in trouble and he's realizing he effed up, his friends are sitting there laughing like, yeah, we're about to die. Ha 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 ha. And, and it's nothing funny. So this is why you don't mess with people who have nothing to live for. You don't have them as friends. I'll tell you like this. When I go, I've been out in public before. I remember, what was it about? Maybe, I think it was maybe about 2 years ago. I was at a gas station. I walked in I was standing in line and, I paid for some gas. And when I turned around, guy bumped into me. I'm like, oh, sorry, my bad, excuse me. And I tried to go around him and they just started like, blah, 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 talking like, man, F you this, and ready to fight over that. And I was like, oh, sorry, dude. I said, excuse me. And they just kept talking. And I just said to him, I just had to stop him and say, I'm sorry. I need you to understand something, and I'm coming from work. I'm wearing, I work in finance, work in an office. And so I'm wearing my suit jacket, and everywhere I go, I have my concealed weapons on me because I have my concealed weapons permit. So everywhere I go, I have my gun on me. I have a finance business. We deal with cash. So I have my gun on me in my office. I have my gun on me at all times. I lend people money and I repo their cars if they don't pay. So I run into a lot of my clients whose cars I've repoed. So I have to always be on edge and protect myself and make sure I'm protected. Now, here's this guy talking to me, just throwing his hands up, just screaming his head off. And he's wearing some skinny jeans and a tank top. So now he's wearing a skinny jean. I'm not a tank top, but a skinny jeans and an undershirt, wife beater. And you can clearly see that this guy has no type of weapon on him. Now, I could have decided I'm going to be a tough guy and I know that I have a gun on me and say, and talk back. But I just stopped him and I just said, dude, I have too much to live for. I got a lot going on. I'm a business owner. I'm not about that life. And when I said that to him and I walked off and I just said, like, have a nice day. And I walked off, the guy looked at me like stunned. Like, it's like the episode of the Boondocks. Like, he was just like, dude, he just looked at me like, dude, what the hell? Like it was like an insult, but it was so elegantly done. Like the dude just kind of stood there and just looked at me like what the fuck you mean just throw away your life? like why won't you just, like, you're black, I'm black, why won't we just be like the N-words and just throw hands and throw our lives away and let this escalate into something it doesn't have to be. And I just looked at him like, yeah, like I'm not one of these street guys, just have a nice day. And I go pump my gas, and when I'm pumping my gas, he walks out of the gas station. He just kind of like has his head down, walk past me, gets in his car, pumps it, gets in his car, and he drives off. So I think, like, at some point in time, we need to be able to tell our children, like, it's okay to let people know you're not about that life. Because if you have stuff going on, like, because somebody who has nothing going on for themselves, they'll be willing to throw their lives away for anything, for a little bit of an argument or whatever the case may be. But if you have stuff going on, you don't even argue with people like that, because they're willing. Like, there's cases, we've seen the cases here in the U.S. where somebody shoots somebody for stepping on their shoe. It's like McDonald's. Like, there's so many fights at the fast food places because my fries were cold, or you forgot to give me a burger, and then it escalates from a verbal argument to a physical argument to where guns come out. There was just a case where the girls walked into a store, asked for a cup so they can get some water, and I don't remember which restaurant, which fast food place it is. When they go to instead of getting the water, the girls decided we're going to get soda. And when the employee said, hey, you can't get the soda, the girls started arguing with them. And one of the guys, the employees, they pull out a gun and went to hit the person across the head, and the gun went off, and it's like, so it just goes to show you how fast things could escalate when you deal with people that have nothing to lose. So, like I said, with this case with Julio Foolio, there was just so many different aspects to this, so many different things that we can learn, so many different things that it was so many moments in this whole case that's teachable. I think as parents, as the elders, we need to pass this information down to our kids and be able to get them to digest it so they can understand it, because all of this whole situation did not have to happen. All right. I'll leave it there and I'll close this podcast down. We're running a little bit. I think this is so far the longest podcast I've done. Thank you for listening and supporting my podcast. I would love to hear your thoughts on this particular episode. You can leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening to my podcast on. If there's a topic or viral video you'd like for me to cover, you can DM me on Instagram at It Had To Be Said Podcast. I post new episodes Tuesday and Thursday at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ladies and gentlemen, good night.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today.